Welcome to Storytime with Ranger Dena. Today we are filming at Lochsa Historic Ranger Station. In the bonus footage, we're going to take a tour around and show you all the things that are here. It is on Highway 12 at mile marker 122. Usually open between May and Labor Day weekend in September. So anyway, I highly recommend stopping. It is beautiful and you can see lots of cool stuff. That's why we picked the book for today is Mailing May by Michael O. Tunnell, sorry, I should have looked that up, and illustrated by Ted Rand, because this is also local history, only from Grangeville to Lewiston. A delightful book. So let's get right to reading. Mailing May. So start with our introductory pages. And because it's a very wordy book, I'll read the story, and then I'll show you the pictures if that works for you. It all started when Ma and Pa promised I could stay a spell with Grandma Mary, who lived 1,000,000 miles away through the rough old Idaho mountains. But when I asked Ma if it was time to go, she just shook her head and sighed real deep. So I tried asking Pa. "No money," said Pa. "Train ticket costs $1.55. I work all day to make that much. Maybe next year." But I just couldn't wait a whole year. So the next morning, when Ma bundled me in my heavy winter coat and sent me out to play in the snow, I made a beeline for Alexander's department store. Mr. Alexander called his hello from atop a ladder. "I need a job," I said. "I need money for the train." Mr. Alexander smiled as he stepped down to the floor. "A job, is it? I wish I could hire you, May. But all the jobs around here are grown-up jobs, like counting money and lifting heavy cartons." I must have looked mighty sad, because Mr. Alexander reached for a jar of peppermint sticks. The sweet, wintry taste didn't do much to cheer me as I slogged my way home. So here's Mr. Alexander's store. Things only got worse when Pa came back from work that night. He and Ma commenced to whispering and peeking at me off and on. Then they made me go to bed awful early, which I did not like at all. Next morning, Ma shook me awake while it was still real dark. I was puzzled to see Pa's little traveling bag packed and standing by the door. When I asked where he was going, Ma only smiled and said, "Eat your breakfast." Just then, someone knocked on our front door. Pa opened up to Ma's cousin Leonard. "Come along, May," Pa said, grabbing the suitcase as Ma helped me with my coat. "We're going to the post office with Leonard." He held up his hand as I opened my mouth. "No questions," Pa said with a wink. Ma hugged and kissed me before Pa took my hand and led me out into the dark winter air. Before long, I stood taking in the funny smells of the Grangeville post office. Glue and canvas bags and oiled wooden floors. Meanwhile, Pa marched right up to Postmaster Perkins and said, "Sam, you got some new rules for mailing packages. I know boxes can weigh up to 50 pounds nowadays, but what sort of things can you send?" Mr. Perkins looked at Pa real strange-like as he asked, "What you got in mind, John?" "It's May," said Pa. "We'd like to mail her to Lewiston." Leonard here mans the mail car on the train, as you well know. He can take good care of our package." "Sure thing, Sam," said Leonard. I was flat flabbergasted by Pa, and so was Mr. Perkins. "Mailing May?" he mumbled, shaking his head. Let's see. The postal code says not to mail lizards or insects or anything smelly. Mr. Perkins looked at me over his glasses and then sniffed. "Guess you passed the sniff test." "But what about girls?" I asked. "Can you mail me?" "Well, the rule book says nothing about children, but it is permissible to mail baby chicks." Mr. Perkins smiled. "Let's find out exactly how much you and your valise weigh." And valise, fancy word for suitcase. I scrambled up onto the big scale, and Pa set his traveling bag next to me. £48 and 8 ounces. Biggest baby chick on record. Mr. Perkins ran his finger down a chart hanging near the scale and turned to Pa. "To mail May from Grangeville to Lewiston will cost 53 cents. Well, Leonard, looks like you'll be in charge of some poultry on this mail run." Before I knew it, Mr. Perkins had glued 53 cents worth of stamps on the back of my coat, along with a label that read, and that is written in some fancy old school cursive. I cannot read it. I'm sorry. It's almost like a work of art. Pa hugged me and told me to be good to Aunt Mary. Then he was gone, and there I was, a package sitting in the post office. Before long, Leonard carted me and the rest of the mail to the train station. The big black steam engine was already waiting, hissing and snorting like a boar hog. The sight made me go all tingly, seeing as I'd never, ever ridden on a train before. After Leonard loaded the mail bags and a few other packages, he called out, "Time to go, May." Then he helped me up the steel steps. At exactly 7 o'clock, the train chugged away from my home and headed down the mountain. I felt as adventuresome as Daniel Boone. The inside of the mail car was like a little post office, and Leonard got busy right away sorting mail to be dropped off at towns along the way. I curled up nearby the stove to keep warm and watched. Whenever Leonard had a free minute, he'd take me to the door for a look. My, oh my, what sights there were to see. Why, we hung on the edge of mountainsides and crawled through tunnels. We crossed deep valleys on top of tall, spidery trestles that Leonard called steel on stilts. Then long about Lapway Canyon, where the train track twists back and forth down the mountain, I began to feel somewhat less adventuresome. Instead, I was feeling dizzy and weak in the stomach. I was about to run to get some fresh air when I heard an angry voice at the door. "Leonard!" yelled a man in a uniform. "That girl better have a ticket or money to buy one." It was Mr. Harry Morris, the train's conductor. I hid behind Leonard as he explained that I was a package, not a passenger. Then he showed Mr. Morris the stamps on my coat. That cranky old conductor slapped his knee and laughed out loud. "I've seen everything now," said Mr. Morris, wiping his eyes. Well, Mr. Morris plumb scared the dizziness right out of me. Even my stomach seemed better, and I started feeling hungry. Leonard said lunch would be at Grandma Mary's. And if you drive out on Highway 95, you can see some of those spidery trestles. They take some beautiful pictures out there. But I can understand why she felt dizzy. The train made a few more stops at towns like Sweetwater and Joseph before we pulled into the Lewiston Railroad Station. Since this was the end of the line, Leonard had time to be my mail carrier, and we headed for Grandma Mary's place. The second I laid eyes on Grandma Mary, I felt downright warm inside. Ma and Pa had kept their promise after all, with a little help from the U.S. Post Office. Okay, I think that is just a delightful story. So at the end, we've got some author's notes that I thought I would share because I just thought it was cool to know the story behind the story. So, this is a true story. On January 1st, 1913, the U.S. Post Office Department introduced domestic parcel post service. And on February 19th, 1914, 5-year-old Charlotte May actually was mailed from Grangeville to Lewiston, Idaho. Indeed, May was classified as a baby chick, and the postage to send her was 53 cents. Her mother's cousin Leonard was the railway postal clerk who manned the mail car between Grangeville and Lewiston. Soon after the train arrived, he delivered May to her grandmother. In those days, there were no decent roads traversing the 75 miles of rugged mountain terrain between Grangeville and Lewiston. Traveling by train, either as a passenger or a package, was the only good way to make the trip. And it was difficult to send messages other than by mail or telegraph. Apparently, the decision to mail May came about so quickly that there was no time to notify her grandmother. Or perhaps May's parents wanted to avoid the additional expense of sending a telegram. In any case, Grandma Mary had no idea her granddaughter was coming, much less coming by parcel post. So there's more. The author thanks different people, but anyway, I just thought that was a delightful story and the perfect place to share it in an equally historic spot.
For more information about the Canistro Railroad that we rode on, this book is excellent. Also, when I called the number to ask questions, I met someone who was actually related to May.
So, thank you very much, and stay tuned for bonus footage of all the cool things at Lochsa Historic Ranger Station. Thank you.
This building was actually constructed as 4 separate log structures and later joined together under a common roof. The State Line cabin was built in 1934 at Lolo Pass. It was moved to Lochsa Historic in 1966. This building served as the first headquarters for the Lochsa Ranger District. If you go to this website, you can download the brochure that you see here, and you can take a walking tour of the Historic Ranger Station even when it's closed. This summer I started giving ranger talks at the campgrounds, and one of my ranger talks is about lichens. So I now look at the ground, at the trees, at all the things with a new appreciation for the teeny tiny things that we can see. So I have been taking pictures of all the lichens I can find. I hope that you enjoy these pictures as much as I do. And these little red ones I had never seen before. I found them simply delightful. I hope you do too. The pixie cup lichens are my favorites. They are called pixie cups or fairy cups because of their resemblance to tiny goblets. The cups are thought to assist in dispersing the spores through rain splash.